So why are you standing to be a welfare and international officer?
I'm standing for welfare and international officer because I believe in a strong union that has a strong voice for students. I'm a campaigner. I've been with the union for a few years now, and I know how the union works. I know what we need to do, and I know how we need to do it so that we can get some big victories for students. And I believe that's what I can do as welfare and international officer next year.
How have you been involved with the union so far?
Currently, until next Friday, I am the external accommodation officer, which I know everybody knows. It's a very high profile role. But basically what that means is that I deal with issues in the private rental market, which is actually most students. And so this year I have been working with other London housing groups and other London universities to try and solve the problem of high rents in London, which is obviously something that we have to coordinate with. It's something that unfortunately just UCLU can't solve on its own. But we've got some things underway, and some legwork's been done, and other universities seem quite receptive, so that's kind of what I've been doing recently.
The accommodation is quite a large part of your manifesto. How will you continue this campaign to improve housing in the private sector?
Well, in the private sector, again, it's about coordinating with other London groups, with other student bodies. NUS London is just being set up at the moment. That would be an avenue to look at. But what UCLU can do is really focus on internal accommodation as well. Our halls at the moment are outrageously expensive. They go up year on year, and you know that's not a private landlord setting that rent. That is the college, and so we've got a lot more power, more leeway to actually affect a good change there. And I think that's something that the union can do quite well.
The University of London is renovating the garden halls, i.e. knocking them down and rebuilding them for the private sector. Are you not worried there's a chance that if you successfully convince UCL to improve the halls, they will just do a similar thing?
What, knock them down?
Knock them down.
I think there's a real risk that the college will begin to privatise our halls in a similar way to the University of London, and I think that's awful, because then we lose the little control we currently have. If we privatise our halls, you know, we continue to see rents go up and up and up, but it's not even going back to the college and then going back into the halls or going into the pockets of the provost, as it probably is right now. It's going into some private company somewhere else, and that's awful, because that means we don't have a say over our halls. It's also worse for workers. The cleaners at these garden halls are going to be most probably without a job once they're done, and when they come back in, they probably won't have the London Living Wage or any of the victories they've had over at the University of London in the last few months. So I would really fight against privatisation of our halls, and I think that's the worst thing that can happen for student halls at UCL.
Now, looking more closely at your manifesto, your first point is to extend psychological services. Would this be UCLU services or UCL's or both?
This would be UCL. Student psychological services are at UCL. There is other stuff that UCLU can do, but I mean the main ones are at UCL. And there's currently, on average, according to student psychological services, an 8-week waiting list from when you first have your meeting to when you actually see a specialist, and that's 8 weeks too long, and also that's an average. So there are many cases of people that have waited over 10 weeks to see somebody, which is just far too long if you have a mental health issue, or you have bereavement, or you're going through a crisis. So I would like to see a strong campaign to actually, really focus the college on student well-being and getting proper investment, proper staffing, because they do a brilliant job. There's just such high demand, and the college are not responding to it. So that's what I'd like to say.
And as welfare and international officer, obviously there's the international aspect of that.
Yeah.
You want to campaign against lowering international student fees. How would you go about this?
I want to campaign for lowering international fees. How would I go about doing this? Well, international students in are a large part of the population at UCL. They're also a large part of the population in London, and so I'd like to organise a campaign because I think people feel very strongly about this. It's a grudge that you hear every time with international students. Unfortunately, it's also something that people usually say there's nothing we can do about, but there's a lot we can do about it. We can get a really good campaign set up. We can coordinate it with NUS International Campaign, which are doing great work on similar themes, and with other universities within London to try and get a union that is fighting for the lowering of fees. Because there is, again, this isn't controlled by the government. This is controlled by the university itself, and they're raising it for no reason. And not only do they raise it, they don't tell anyone that they raise it until you go along and pay your fees. So we have to completely reform the system. We do it, and only a strong UCLU can do that.
This year has been the first year of having a specific BME officer and a women's officer. Do you think these roles have helped?
Yes, yeah, I think I am in neither of those liberation groups, so what I say isn't particularly important on that, and that is for those two groups to have an opinion on that themselves. But from what I've seen and what I've heard, I think they've done a good job. Yeah.
You've also recently supported giving part-time wages to the LGBT and disability officers. Do you think these jobs should be full-time?
Yeah, I think they do. I think that there is a disparity between the liberation groups, and UCLU talks a lot about liberation, and it's right to do so, and it does do a lot of good on liberation. The LGBT campaign, which is the one that I've had personal experience with, is absolutely brilliant. However, it is just unacceptable to have two of these liberation groups with a full-time officer and two without, despite the fact that all four groups do roughly the same amount of work, or could be doing the same amount of work. There's so much in the LGBT campaign that we could be doing that really does require a full-time officer, and the part-time officer was just a stopgap for a year, that was unfortunately voted down. So yeah, I'd like to see, basically equality between liberation groups in the sabbatical office.
You say in your manifesto you want to make welcome fare more accessible. What do you mean by this?
Well, yeah, I'd like to make welcome fare more welcoming, because when you go to welcome fare, it's meant to be the icing of the cake of our freshers week. A lot of freshers don't really know what is going on. Lots of returning students don't come back. But when you do get there, you have to queue for hours. It's hot, it's stuffy, it's loud, it's cramped, and if you are slightly claustrophobic, even if you're not claustrophobic, it feels pretty tight in there. If you have mobility issues, there's no way you can go and enjoy welcome fare like everybody else. As well as having to queue for ages if you need to take regular breaks or you need to take regular food for whatever reason. There's just no way you can do that there. So that needs to change on an organisational level. A really good way to get people more active, which is what I'd like to do, is to set up a e-welcome fare to run alongside it, where you would have the welcome fare online as well. It would be on for longer. It would allow people to, get used to what society is, because sometimes new students don't know what societies are, and you'd be able to fill out your email address and sign up to the society's mailing list, to know who the president is, perhaps see a short video or the material that they'd give out on the stall. And I think that's quite an easy way of solving quite a lot of problems, basically.
You want to ensure that the health centre remains on campus. Why do you think this is important? Yeah,
I think the health centre is just an integral part of our community, and it serves so many students. And it's so important. I mean, I don't use the health centre because I've moved to a postcode that doesn't allow it. Unfortunately, they're not very keen on South London. But a lot of people go for it and have it for the whole 3 years that they're at UCL, and that's really important that you have a GP with you throughout the whole time at university, especially if it's the first time in London, especially if it's your first time in the UK. That you need to have it. So the idea that it could go off campus, the idea that it could not exist, is just outrageous. And I think also it's part of a bigger point, which is that the college do not listen to us. They do not even respect or even want to listen to us. That's why they're trying to get rid of the garage theatre. It's why places like the JBR are going to be gone next year, and the lower refectory and the old refectory, meaning societies aren't going to have anywhere to hold parties or social events or speakers. They're not going to be able to rehearse. And if you want to put on a show, you're going to have to put it on in the Bloomsbury, which is just out of most societies' price range. So, yeah, so it's part of a wider point, and so I would really like to see a really strong union that speaks for its students, and we speak loud enough so college actually has to listen to us.